an exciting conversation in Bossier City, learning not only about the history of what's changing this community, but about how teaching here is really having an effect on the next generation. Well, good morning to all our friends along the Gulf Coast and everywhere we've traveled in between. We are here on our road trip in Bossier City, Louisiana. I am Kevin, so excited to be sitting here in a schoolhouse and not in timeout. And I am with my good friend Curtis.
I can't believe you said schoolhouse. Okay,
schoolhouse.
But we're gonna go with that.
We are in a school.
Schoolhouse rocks, right?
We are in a school. But we have a guest with us today.
Yeah.
We do.
We do. We have Teddy. Teddy, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. You got a very interesting history.
I'm Teddy Cox. I'm currently a teacher at Providence Classical Academy here in Bossier City, Louisiana. I'm 44 years old. I grew up here in Bossier City, and I graduated a nearby high school. After that, I went to starting college at Texas A&M, and I lasted about a year and a half, or a semester and a half there. I wasn't quite prepared for college. So then after that, I joined the Army. Spent 4 years getting to serve my country, and I getting to travel the world, which was great. After that, I went back into college and got my undergrad degree. After that, I started a career in law enforcement that I thought was going to be really productive for me, and it really was. But after about 10 years of that, I just started seeing that God maybe had something a little bit different for me, and so I decided I wanted to get out and go work on a master's degree in counseling. And so while I'm doing that, have a job that's a little bit more conducive to a college schedule, I started getting into teaching, and I came here to Providence, and it's been a very, very fulfilling experience for me. This will be my third year coming up this next school year.
And you said something there when you were introducing yourself, and you said, God had different plans, and I feel like it's so interesting when where we want to go and where God's plans and direction take us, and those start to follow, and we become more obedient, we listen, and we hear more, the fruits that are going to come from your efforts. And so we've been talking this morning, and I want to continue this conversation about this season that you're in and what you see coming from not only teaching here, but this counseling profession that you're embarking on, and how that's going to change lives in the community. We're doing a long series here. It's our podcast about how we change lives in communities. And so, how do you? Well, I won't even ask you how to or how would you. What excites you most about going into counseling, what you're doing now, and how you think you might have an effect on the youth in the community?
Especially going into counseling, I really learned a lot during my time in law enforcement, and that a lot of it's not just simple as you're doing the wrong thing, we'll just stop doing that. A lot of people kind of have that perception, and you can't just do that. Sometimes there are a lot of people who have so many traumas or different things in their past that really kind of affects their thinking, and so it doesn't necessarily, it can't be summed up simply as, we'll just stop doing that and your life will be better. And so, I got to see that in law enforcement when, whether I'm working in a jail, in corrections, or I'm out on the streets, seeing with people, and it seemed like I'm interacting with the same people every time. It's because they just can't seem to get out of the situation that they're in or the thinking, even though they want to. And so I really got to see that and thinking that, I want to be able to help that. And so that's why I decided to go get into counseling. And it's been a great experience being able to learn how we think, or the different theories of how people think and grow, and how it affects our behaviors and stuff like that. And it's really opened my mind and really has humbled me, and kind of really been able to take away a lot of the biases that I've had toward different people and different cultures and stuff, and show that, there's more to it than just simply stop doing that.
So you teach history, which really
exactly, yes.
tells a story. Curtis, I know you've got some thoughts here, but we're always talking about the story. Mm-hmm. What better place to find that than in the history?
Absolutely. You spoke earlier too about trauma. Trauma is connected to the history of a person, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And understanding the significance of that helps you understand that person better, and help you actually to respond to them in a way in which does not further create the issues that we see them actually displaying. So with you being in education now, but prior to that, being in corrections and then being on the street, I think you clearly you've actually seen how all those things manifest itself and just come to be. And this is ground level one here, where all those perceptions and behaviors left untreated can actually go into those situations where you start to see it on the street and then eventually in the jails.
Right. Oh yeah, definitely. It just always, I worked in the jail for about 6 years, and I was, it was direct supervision jail, so I'm right there in the middle with the inmates all day long, and tried to keep as professional a relationship as I could. But I mean, a lot of the guys I really got to know real well, and it would just hurt me every time when they're getting released and they're all, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna change my life, and then in a month or two they're back.
What's the hang up? What do you see being the reason why they were never successful in maintaining that motivation?
Well, when they're put in jail, they're just in jail, and they're just, it's the same old thing. They're not getting any kind of education or anything, and so they're not given learning any new skills. So when they get out to go and try to live a different way or a different life or get away from the situation they were, so they just go right back to where they were at home, to all those bad influences, everything like that, and so it's just too hard for them to get out of that. So that was just always what killed me, is that, the term is recidivism. And so that's the issue. And crime prevention is not just about arresting people and putting them in jail.
Kevin, he's hitting on something that you and I talk about all the time.
Yeah.
And it's so important, and it's coming from someone who's been in law enforcement.
Yeah.
Okay. He hadn't stopped thinking like a cop. Okay. Just like he hadn't stopped thinking like a soldier. He still thinks like a soldier. You still think like a cop, but you also now think in a way in which, how do we solve the problem? How do we address the problem?
I want to dive deeper for a second. You said it was bothering you. Can we unpack that for just a second?
Go ahead.
Because I know how it feels. I've been places. I've seen things turn out horribly, and and I hate to use this example, and hopefully this comes out the right way, but then you see that 2 or 3 year old walking in that house in diapers, and you think to yourself, like, how can I contribute to solving that problem? Because when you see that, you're like, this is what they're experiencing, and it's not anyone's fault. It's actually a set of circumstances, and it's part of that story. And so when you say it bothers me, it triggers something in me as well, because I think back, I can think of 2 or 3 specific things in my life, at work, where I've seen that, and it bothered me emotionally. Like, it bothers you because you are seeing that, and you want hope, for that person, and then you see this 2 or 3 year old, and that's the next generation. You're like, I got to rescue this person,
right.
and God rescues us. And so that's how it bothers you. And so without like taking you to some dark place, when you say that bothers you, is like, how do you turn that bother into inspiration to do something? And like you are, I mean, you're pursuing a way to get to sort of the legacy of a safe community at an earlier stage. And so the bother part, that's what I want to talk about for a minute, as far as your experiences.
Well, yeah, I think that's, I don't know if a gift or whatever, but I've had compassion for a lot of people and be able to empathize, I guess, which I think is going to definitely help me when I get into counseling. But it just, I think a lot of in our culture, I guess American culture in general, it's just easier just to turn the other way. The way you can't look at it, and you don't have to. It won't affect you, and you just go on do your own thing. I don't have that ability to do that. I can't just turn away. And I'm not trying to tout myself, but I just think that's something that a gift that God has given me, or something that's that He laid on my heart. And so, I'll admit that when I first started working in jail, I had kind of the mentality, okay, I'm going to go work with all these criminals and everything like that. And it didn't take me very long to realize that they weren't criminals. These were fathers, husbands, grandfathers, sons who, for whatever reason, made the wrong decisions, whether it was a mistake or it was something like that, and that I could have very well been in the same position had I grown up the way they did. And so, the time that it really hit me the most was when I was overseeing visitation at our jail, and one of the inmates was talking with his wife and his like 2 or 3 year old daughter, and I told him it was time. His time was up, and so he had to get up. And then his baby girl was just screaming and bawling, and Daddy, Daddy, reaching out. Of course, they've got glass in front, so she couldn't touch him or anything like that. And seeing her, that just really made me think, okay, this is not just criminals. This is not just jail. There's more of a problem here. And then that inmate was just completely broken down, and that just really that touched me there. And I think that's kind of where the start was, where I've got to do more than just work here in this jail.
And you're still working in the field or the sphere of public safety, and you're wanting to even take it a step further by going into counseling, where you're getting the opportunity to actually work with people to solve problems. And that's what you did as a law enforcement officer.
Right.
Your goal was not just to arrest, but to solve problems, right? And to bring about a balance to that moment, so that people can actually move forward and thrive and be safe.
Right.
You're doing the same thing now. So really, you may be in a different season, as Kevin said earlier, but I think that the season is very familiar to you, so much so that you remain in it.
Yeah.
And from time to time, we kind of do these little 20-second challenges, and so I'm gonna go.
Be careful, man.
I'm gonna go with this 20-second challenge.
Okay,
I feel like we're on something, and when we're on the topic, I really want our viewers. Look, we can't affect change alone.
Right.
We need people to come alongside of us. That's actually the reason we started the podcast. Was we wanted to do something different outside the box, literally risk everything that we've kind of worked for on this thought that if we just had an authentic, honest conversation, we could go. But you mentioned something in there, as far as American culture, and what's really interesting is we have these discussions all the time of vision and culture. And vision is sort of, where are we headed? Culture is, how do we sort of interact when we're there? And people always focus on the vision. We have to have a plan. But if you develop the right culture, people will follow you anywhere. And so how do we change the culture so that we no longer have or what would you say to somebody who said, hey, like in the jail, it would have been so easy to say, that's their problem, that's not my problem.
Right.
But even to society, we've got faith, family, education, government, these 4 pillars. And you're in a school system, you were in the government sector before in multiple capacities, and it's easy to say, well, that's the school's problem. No, that's the police problem. No, that's mom and dad's problem. What would you say to somebody who's standing here right now that said, well, why are you so concerned? That's not your problem.
So it is my problem. It's all of our problems. I mean, whether it's crime or violence or whatever. I mean, it may affect more of one neighborhood or one area of a city, but it ultimately affects the entire city. Bossier City is right next to Shreveport, Louisiana, who has a very high crime rate. And, it affects everybody. Everybody's always talking about it. Like, what's wrong? Why is there always crime and stuff like that? And so it does. It affects all of us. And so we can't just look away. Because if you just look away, then you're not helping.
No, it ripples out to you.
Exactly.
It's that ecosystem that we talk about all the time, right?
Your 20 seconds. What would you say to someone that
just said it. No, Teddy's spot on. I think the reality is that it is our problem. We have to challenge ourselves to look inward, so that we may immediately look outward and do those things that we can do. No one's asking you to change the world. Christ has already done that.
Yeah.
But the reality is we all have a part to play, right?
Yeah.
You're playing your part, man. This is awesome, because you've not forgotten the responsibility that all of us have in being a difference to someone. So you're just doing it in a different capacity right now.
And I hear that, and you both said something, so I'm going to steal what you each said and combine it into one sentence. And if I was answering that question, I agree with both of you 100%. But I feel like if somebody comes to me and says that's not your problem, they're not looking in the right direction. Right. And first, you got to look to God. Second, you got to look around you. I always say you got to put yourself in check too, because just because you think the air is cool in your car, there's someone else that's got a broken car and the air's not playing. What's their story? They're still trying to get to work, right? And I use this sort of example of we sit at a traffic light. We're not really concerned with what's happening in all those other cars that are there, but every one of those cars has a story that's happening within it, and we're just comfortable in ours. And so I feel like that's it, right? And this is the really cool thing about teaching history is we're looking back to figure out where we need to be looking to go forward. Whole separate conversation. We don't need to get into the schools and all that. We could have a conversation on that too, which is why you have to have this reference point.
Right.
And I believe, if God's our cornerstone, then history is our reference point, and you have to be able to look at those and say, Why is that important? Because if you don't know where you are going to look, you know, I equate things to water and boats. I'm a water guy, so I like the water, and I'm always, you know, constantly saying you will stay adrift if you don't find the appropriate anchor point. And I feel like that's what you're talking about, is if you don't know where to look, you're not going to, how can you follow a plan when you don't even know where you're looking? And so throw some thought into this for just a second as we kind of wind this down. But, you know, you've got a class full of students. How do you help them sort of direct their thoughts and make them really examine being a contributing member of the community when they grow up? They're going to replace us.
Right, yeah.
What are we doing what's our succession plan?
Well, fortunately for me, I kind of have an easy route because I teach history. And so I get to really show them, you know, how bad things can get, you know, in certain areas, you know, if people turn their, you know, turn their head and look. I mean, you know, I cover the Civil War. I cover World War II. And I even as sixth graders, I really get into deep in how the German people turned their head to what all that Hitler was trying to do and everything. And the next thing you know, you got the Holocaust, and most Germans didn't even know that was going on at the time.
Yeah.
You know, and so, but then you look at the Civil War, and you know, people turn their heads. Oh, well, we've got to have slavery because of our economy and everything, and that's just part of our how our culture is down here in the South and whatever like that. And people just kind of, well, I guess that's how it is, and they accept it how it is. But then, you know, 150 years later or more, you know, we're still dealing with all of those issues. And so people turning their heads, you know, is going to keep problems. And so, you know, I mean, and I teach from the beginning of time to, you know, present day. And so I'm constantly having to show them, look, this is why we learned this, for one thing. They're always asking me, why do we learn history? And like, well, this is why. And it's been really effective. And I think the kids enjoy it. Well, they tell me they enjoy it. They maybe could be just sucking up a little bit. But, you know, I see their eyes opening up every time we learn to delve about different things. But I'm able to, being a classical school, being a Christian-based school, I'm able to throw God into it too, and also show how God His hand is in everything too. And but again, my main thing is to show them that, you know, you're not just learning about history. You are a part of history, and it's up to you to, you know, do what you can with what you have and to affect, you know.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
The landscape of history is just as relevant now as it was then. Mm-hmm. And I think what we forget is that we get plugged into it whether we want to or not. Mm-hmm. And it's about what we do while we're in it that matters most. So giving them that is cool, because you can, in fact, bring those things all together to show them this is why we are where we are today, because of some of the things we failed to learn in history.
And I feel like actually the current generation, if I could speak out of the generation to those, you know, you can't say that history doesn't play a part in our decision making, but then at the same time get on social media and say, what are the reviews for this restaurant? Right. Or what's the reviews for this pair of sneakers? Yeah. Or, you know, hey, I want to go into this career or do this. And you get on there and you research these things and you value what other people say, but from their experiences, that's their history. Yeah. Now, you have to evaluate what credibility they might bring to their experience, but that's no different than decision makers that you may or may not have agreed with, but there was a history created. And so I feel like we are experiencing a different type of history in that, and that's part of our journey and our story. And I certainly agree, you know, as we close this out today, I feel like you've said so many impactful things, and I'm going to be thinking about this conversation for a long time. And if we pass back through here again, which we should, hopefully, I'd love to sit down with you again and continue this conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
But, you know, this whole piece about turning our eye and not looking and things happening around us and not being a problem, you know, history has shown us. You brought up World War II, you brought up, Civil War, civil rights, everything else. If we ignore it, we become part of the problem, and we will be on one side or the other, regardless of us thinking that we're not involved. We will have no choice, and so you have to take a stand. And more importantly, we just have to have a conversation, and I feel like that's what we're doing today. We don't always have to agree on everything, but why can't we discuss it?
Exactly.
And bringing God into the middle of it, it will always work itself out, because we take the focus off of where we think we want to look, and it brings us back to where he's told us to look. And so I'm so appreciative and glad that you were
Well,
here
thank
today.
y'all. Appreciate it.
Curtis, you got the final words on this one today.
Oh man, I have no words. I think Teddy gave us plenty to actually think about. I would just add this, that what we do now is important. Anyone who listens to this conversation, hopefully they leave with some thought of what can I do? Because we all have a part to play. We just all have to decide that we want to play it.
Well, thank you so much for what you do. And on behalf of everybody who probably walked by and maybe forgot to thank you once in a while for your service, for your service in law enforcement as well, and for your service here in raising up the youth in the right way in a schoolhouse.
In a schoolhouse. Schoolhouse
thank you.
rocks. Yeah.
We are all part of this together. It truly takes all of us. And our goal is to impede violence, but also to improve perception. And you've got experience that truly can affect both of those. And so thank you for what you do. Curtis and I are on the road. We'll see where we wind up next, but we're in a season of learning, and we couldn't think of a better place to take that season than to a schoolhouse in Bossier City. So to our viewers, we appreciate you so much. Oh, it's not going to stop, but we appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you next Friday at 8:30. Stay safe and help us impede violence and improve perception. It truly takes all of us.
Thanks, Teddy.
Thank y'all very much.